News opinion: Trump's shutdown was a cruel joke. The New York Times. It revealed the folly of the president's approach to politics. The editorial board represents the opinions of the board, its editor and the publisher. It is separate from what a debacle President Trump's shutdown proved to be. What a toddler's pageant of foot-stomping and incompetence, a vainglory and self-defeat. Mr. Trump tormented. He succeeded only in exposing the emptiness of his bully's bravado, of his "I alone can fix it" posturing. Once upon a time, maybe you want a wall. Can you possibly? In his announcement, the president struggled to obscure his failure with yet another rambling infomercial about the glory of walls. No matter where you go, there is nothing to celebrate about this sorry shutdown, though it's perhaps understandable that congressional Democrats were reveling in Mr. Trump's collapse. Members of within minutes of the announcement, the bomb-throwing pundit Ann Coulter, you among those credited with having scolded Mr. Trump into rejecting the temporary funding bill passed by the Senate last month, you tweeted her judgment. Good news for George Herbert Walker Bush as of today. He is no longer the biggest wimp ever to serve as President of the United States. The President tried to stand tough for Ms. Coulter and her ilk, even as federal, but on Friday he caved. With a growing number of Republican lawmakers were already in a foul mood. On Thursday, along with their concerns about the human cost of the shutdown, Republicans were no doubt antsy about the negative impact the shutdown was having on their president's public standing. Polls consistent. On top of all that, the Russia investigation hit the headlines again, when, in a pre-dawn raid on Friday, FBI agents were working without pay. Roger Stone, a longtime advisor to Mr. Trump. Mr. Stone it was, in short, shaping up to be a very bad day for the president, who really cannot be blamed for wanting to change the storyline. Of course, the new narrative view that Mr. Trump got owned by Ms. Pelosi is likely to sit well with him, either. And who knows what helped. In his Friday remarks, Mr. Trump made threatening noises about declaring a national emergency if Congress cannot reach a compromise by the time this agreement expires. Polls suggest that he is hoping that this mess leaves Mr. Trump with a vital lesson: you, even if you do care about a functional government, the rest of America does. Follow the New York Times opinion section on, and